teach in a variety of things over there. And so she's joined the curriculum team with Arnie, Miriam, and Nora was not here today, but
we only have 75%.
But they're the curriculum team, and they've been working exceptionally hard doing the scores. So I will turn it over to them.
And we're just hoping we know how to use the rule. Then, can you give me a 30-second tutorial up here, and I'll pass it on. I'll show you. Okay. And I'm sure you want your notebook.
No, that one's okay. And then for your handout in there. So
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right, I'll do that. Well, good morning, and Mr. President, and Madam Board members, I guess. Dr. Boyle, Dr. Wagner. Should I call him Dr. Boyle as you did at New Teacher?
Yeah, it's okay. No. What happened this summer?
That's what we all said. Well, thank you for having us here today. And I was going to say 75% of our team is here. But we will be talking to you today about Common Core standards and how they align with our first three initiatives. And it's going to be curriculum, assessment, and instruction. And just so lay back, we're going to be watching videos, doing activities. It's really going to be kind of fun. But we do have you till noon, so we'll get started. What I'd like you to do, oh, no, I haven't done this yet. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about today, the first three initiatives: curriculum, alignment to Common Core, assessment, and instruction, and of course, rigor. What I'd like you to do, because we are going to be having some interaction, is we're going to be having you work with shoulder partners. So Donna and Tiffany will be shoulder partners. Carl and Robin will be shoulder partners. Dr. Wagner and Dr. Boyle will be observers, and so they can assist also. I'm going to even give you labels. Donna and Carl, you're going to be the A partner. And Tiffany and Robin, and someone can, Donna, you can kind of help her when Tiffany comes back. Tiffany and Robin are going to be B partners. Okay. So your first assignment for right now is for Donna and Tiffany to take the first quote, the first part of this quote that says standards are the foundation upon. Okay, Carl and Robin, you're going to be looking at the second quote. And what you're going to do is I just want you to read it and then talk about what does this really say to you? What does this mean? And then we're going to share out. And how we're going to do it is the A person is going to actually read the quote to your other partner. And then the B person is the one that's going to have to share out. Okay, so we'll give you about 3 minutes to do that. So if you want to get started, go ahead. Okay. And you might just have to read yourself, Donna.
Oh no, I'm not going to be A and B.
Okay.
That would make me schizophrenic. My partner's here. You missed the exercise.
Sorry.
What we're gonna do is we're reading this. Yeah. We gotta make sure what this works in the real time, okay? I'm the key person, which means I read this aloud. You're the key person, you're gonna share what you think, and we gotta decipher together. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. Sorry. It's saying that I know, in case somebody training. Does this make sense to you? Alex.
She's gonna make it work.
No, we're supposed to.
Okay, and just kind of give me a little hand wave when you're ready to share out. We'll give them a little more time because they were so fast.
We guess.
I read the quote, it's interpreted.
Work we're doing a fresh idea start here. Every time we do start with the dance, we're like, I'm the oldest one here on that. I'll talk.
All right, so how about Carl and Robin?
Yep.
Robin, would you like to share out what you talked about?
Doesn't he have to read the quote first?
No, he read it just to you.
Oh, okay.
He had to just read it to you, and
Okay,
you had
well,
to discuss it.
We decided that the standards were what comes down from the Department of Ed, and then we have to take the basics, but we also have to customize it to our students, using the blueprints and the roadmap and the benchmarks, but making sure that it all fits our kids so that they can succeed.
So we personalize it.
Yeah, we have to personalize it.
Okay, very good. And how about Tiffany, would you like to share out with your group?
Sure. Our quiz was about standards being the foundation. And so I first pictured a house and she pictured a pyramid, but it was both, I think we were both thinking of the same basic thing. If everything comes back to those standards, the assessments, the accountability, preparing your teachers, professional development.
Great interpretation. Thank you for doing that. And as Lynn referred to and mentioned in her presentation, you know, standards is what we as a district really look at to develop our EPOs, our professional development, and just repeating what you have said. So standards are really important. What we're going to do is we're going to listen to a video clip, and I've done some times. It is, I said we're going to watch videos. It's 15, it's actually 12 minutes long, but I have some stop and starts. And I am technology impaired, so I will do my best to be able to stop and start it when appropriate. If I have problems, we'll just kind of go through, because what I'm taking out is this person is talking a lot about high school things, and which is all very important, and we all need to know that. But we were trying to focus today just on K-8. And okay, so this is a video of Dr. Phil Darrow. Darrow talks about the principles that he and other Common Core standard authors used to form the new standards, what their intentions were and what their vision was. So we're gonna
Don't take your old state standards out of their boxes and swap in the Common Core standards. They're meant as a platform for a new kind of instructional system. They're not meant.
She said she turned it up. Oh, we're just stopping.
So glad you're getting this out of the way so that it's my turn.
I know.
Don't take your old state standards out of their boxes and swap in the Common Core standard for a new kind of instructional system. They're not meant to be a new list of topics for the old instructional system. This is very deliberate in the way that they were designed. We were told to base it on evidence, and a big part of the evidence was lessons learned from 20 years of accountability. And those 20 years of standards-based accountability systems, some good things have happened and some things are broken. And we tried to fix what's broken. In mathematics, many of the things that are broken are summed up in the phrase, a mile wide, inch deep. So where does a mile wide, inch deep come from? We're doing it to ourselves. Nobody's doing it. When are we doing it? We're doing it when we turn standards into long lists. We're doing it when we tell teachers to cover instead of to teach. When we give them pacing plans, we tell them to cover everything on the test. Cover is a synonym for inch deep. We want our standards to be higher, which means deeper, not wider. So we shouldn't be worried about getting the width of the standards. That's what cover means. We should be worried about getting the depth. That's what learn means. And learning correlates with achievement, including achievement on standardized tests. And that covering does not. The highest scoring countries covered less than we did, not more. And so we try to make these more focused and more coherent. That means less stuff. It also means the relationships among the standards matter and matter a lot. So the superstructure, the way standards are clustered, the pages that introduce each grade level are about the coherence and the focus of the standards. And they shouldn't be ignored. And the 8 practice standards hold them all together. That's part of the coherence. Don't look backward and try to relate these to the past. Look forward. In other words, No more crosswalking. Crosswalking is jaywalking. No more aligning. No more, all of that kind of stuff is paying attention to the wrong thing. That's breaking the standards down into pieces so you have an incoherent list of topics. That's not what they are. And we shouldn't be doing that with them. They're describing the picture as a whole and breaking it up into manageable parts. It's not just a collection, a list of topics. Standard.
Yeah. That's close enough.
Have two kinds of standards.
And you just talked about, we have two kinds of standards.
Content standards you're familiar with, grade by grade standards. But the other kind are these, the mathematical practices standards. These are descendants of the NCTM process standards, adding it up 5 proficiencies, a lot of research into what mathematicians do and how students learn. You can see what the kind of things they are. Make sense of complex problems and persevere in solving them. They're on pages 6, 7, and 8 of the Common Core standards, and there's a paragraph or two defining each of them. What we did with these is take things that people liked but ignored. Everyone loved the process standards and everyone ignored them. And we tried to make them more mathematical. We tried to make them more closely related to the content standards. But if you look at these, the way we thought of them as a definition of mathematical expertise. And what we mean by that is a student starts as a beginner, then they're a novice, then they're an apprentice, and they become an expert. Expertise develops over time in complex ways. It's not just something you learn. It's the way you change as a person. It's the way knowledge comes together and gets used. It's attitudes, it's habits. And you notice, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. This assumes kids are talking to each other in class.
In your tab 1,
We're telling principals and school districts,
they are the green sheets that
this
that
is
he's
the basis
talking
for
about
your
if you wanted
relationship
to
with
look at the
teachers
actual math
at the lesson
practices.
level, not content
Actually,
coverage.
this
And these are practices of students,
Second.
not teaching practices.
Oh,
They have direct implications for teaching practices,
Just wake it up.
do what?
but they're
Wake it up.
practices of students. So I urge you as a first step towards the Common Core standards to start with the practices and as a group of teachers, figure out what commitments you'll make to make these practices sort of the center of the classroom culture. There's another way of looking at these, which has become more and more the way I think about them. These define the content of a student's mathematical character. These are like character. You don't, when you're trying to
What this is, and you will have access to this video, what he says here.
are in effect. Other thing, the strands. This is where you get incoherence for being too general. So in grade 1, in typical US standards, it looked like that. In grade 12, still looked like that. To us, that was a source of incoherence. So we did things like this. We broke number into 3 different progressions. Operations and algebraic thinking, this is a K5. Number and operations, phase 10, arithmetic, and fractions. And these 2 fed into the number system by in 6th, 7th grade. And this fed into expressions and equations, and they both feed into algebra. So we had things like many of the high-performing countries that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They're not K-12. So most states thought making strands at K-12 was a virtue. We saw it as a menace. So we have things start, have a middle, and an end. They're real.
Okay. And then could you get me out of that back to the PowerPoint? And what, if you look at your green sheets now, what he's talking about, I'll talk about the standards first, or the strands first. What he's really talking about, what is the real difference, is he showed the pic of a first grade, what the strands were, and then in 12th grade, and they were the same strands. If you look at the very first green sheet, that looks, it says the overview of the new Common Core standards. What it shows you is that we are now more focused, the Common Core standards, and coherent. So if you look at 3rd grade, and I know the shading's a little hard to see, but they do not do counting and cardinality. All right? They start off with operation and algebraic thinking, number and operation in base 10. Then right there in 3rd grade is where we begin fractions, where we used to have fractions all the way in kindergarten. Then, of course, measurement and data and geometry. So the domains is what they're calling them, have changed. And then if you just follow the little path, you can see how counting and cardinality at kindergarten does really help with ratio and proportions and relationships that then help with functions that go on to high school. So this first part is different, and we won't have the strands like we had before. We'll have different domains. That's what he was talking about there. Them, of course, being more focused and more coherent. And because there is less, then our expectation as educators is to go deeper into those concepts.
Arnie, just some overview on Common Core. Like, we, as a state, have adopted this, so I'm curious, how did that come to be? And then number 2, I guess we don't really have a say, or do we have a say? Like, is this right for Creighton? Or is this something we just have to do, so we're going to make it work?
I'll kind of answer some of those
Okay.
in the rest of the presentation, or actually, Sylvia is going to talk about the implementation, but we actually had no choice. But I'm sorry that, because in the beginning I thought he talked about it, but I think we were playing around a little bit. At this point, I believe there are 48 states in the United States that have adopted these standards.
Mm-hmm. So Texas and what, Alaska didn't?
I
know for sure. Yeah, I know Texas for sure.
did not.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not sure about all states. I will find that out for you now. But yeah, and maybe I should have done the whole 15 minutes, but I was just trying to focus on what the differences were between the old ones and the new ones. But he did talk a little bit. This is a very valuable video. It is totally 15 minutes long, and it really does talk about the authors and how they came together, how they looked at the Thames report, how they looked at Netherlands, how they looked at high-performing countries, Singapore and Hong Kong, and came up with the standards. I think Miriam is going to refer to in her presentation about even looking at the states that had high-performing results, and then they even looked at those states and included some of those standards in the Common Core.
Yeah. So are our teachers excited about this? Is this a good? I mean, is this?
It's a fabulous thing.
Okay.
I mean, it is so focused. And it really is taking away these lists where you check off and then you got to do this and then you got to do this and you got to do this. The whole standard is more complex, more open-ended, more of a deep understanding than just this. It's a checklist. I believe that it seems to us that the teachers are really excited about it. Maybe they weren't so excited about delving into it last year because they were really teaching the regular standards, and then we were asking them to kind of look at the Common Core, and they're like, you know, in their minds, like, if this is 2 years down the road, I mean, I got to worry about lesson plans for tomorrow. Why am I doing this? So there might have been a little uncomfortableness about that, but in the summer work that we've been doing, and when they're really designing these units and lessons, there's real excitement. It's almost like we finally get to teach again. I mean, it's the whole child. They get to communicate, they get to present, they really get to share their knowledge. You know, we're not just making sure they have this, then going on, making sure they have this, and then not getting that transfer. Well, they had it in September, I don't know why they don't have it in April.
Yeah.
It's just more of a focused and coherent. So we're hoping it's going to be great. All right, so I really did want to just kind of talk a little bit about the domains and how they work together. Then if you turn the page over to mathematical practices, these were the 8 practices that he was speaking of. And what's really nice about these is this is, you know, it refers to what the classroom should look like, what we really should be doing. And these do develop the mathematical character of our students. Their habits of mind. And the 8 practices, it's kind of hard to see, but if you look at them, 2 of the practices come under productive mathematical thinker. 2 of them are under reasoning and explaining, modeling and using tools, and seeing structure and generalizing. And one of the things that we have done with all of our teachers, well, with our 2nd through 8th grade teachers and with leadership, is we took these 8 standards. If you look at the next 2 pages, actually I think it's the next 3 pages, and we really looked at them during our, one of the cycles, the math cycles that we did last year in combination with West Ed. We looked at each one of these and had the teachers really delve into it, look into it, flesh out ideas, and actually design posters and then share out. We also did that with our leadership team, so that we just had a little bit more of an understanding about what does this look like. And what's kind of nice is on, you know, because he just had the list up here, but in your handbooks, you actually have a paragraph that talks a little bit more specifically about what does making sense of problems and persevere in solving them. What does that really look like in the classroom? And I just want to... So, not that this, and it's, oh, I do have a handout for this. Yeah, thank you. Of course, I wish I could say, and this is what all the teachers created, and we took pictures of this. But this is just a nice, this is what we actually had them do. They read the art, or the paragraph, they had a poster, they talked in groups of 4 to 5, some might have been a little bit larger. Then they had to summarize it all in a statement and then come up with like a poster that they could teach the rest of the group. So that's just kind of an example of what we did with the, thank you. And then if you flip the paper over, then you have all of the 8 practices. This is going to be a shift. And if you've been in education long enough, like some of us have been, this is, back in our Turk days, you might have heard that terrible word, but when Charlotte and I were in the classroom, we had a program that was called Turk, and I'm not even sure what the whole thing, 90s? Yes, yeah, but I was thinking of what TERC stands for. I don't even know.
It's actually the name of the company.
The company that produced it, okay, so that doesn't matter. But it was so wonderful. I mean, the kids had to draw, they had to write, they had to explain, they had to argue, they had to defend, and it was just a wonderful program. One of the problems with it that we saw is it wasn't that spiral-bound teacher's guide that so many teachers were used to. And those that had a good mathematical background were very comfortable in it. Those that didn't were like, well, where's page 2 and page 5 and where's the end of the chapter test? And so that was a little difficult. But and also in the middle school, we had what was called Math in Context, and we referred to it as MIC. And these were the activities that we did. Well, I'm telling you, maybe back in the good old days, the COVID days as you call it, I'm not so sure about that. But anyway, back in those, when you walked into a math classroom, it wasn't all in your seat, silent, doing, papers. The kids were up, measuring things, using manipulatives. That's not true. I mean, you walked in and it was almost like, oh my gosh. I can remember being a teacher at Kennedy and having my principal walk in and thinking, oh no, she didn't come in today to observe, because the kids were all just doing all kinds of things. But fortunately enough, she was very supportive and, liked that kind of interaction. But it really was kind of a program that this is lending to, where the teacher is supportive and facilitating, but the kids are doing the learning, and the kids are doing the action. So I'm really excited about it. Many teachers are really excited about it, and it's only going to really help improve, our children and their understanding.
If I could just add one thing, especially to the mathematics, these standards. I was doing curriculum 20-some years ago, and these are very, very similar to the National Council of Teachers Mathematics Standards about 20 years ago. It's just, some things have come together that have moved us as a country forward in terms of actually getting to the place where we can implement these habits of minds, or practices as they call them. 20 years ago they were habits of mind. They've been there. They're not, these are not new things. The research on instruction in math has been there to say that we should have been using it. That's why we went to programs like TURK and MIC. They were not complete programs. There were gaps in those programs, and there were challenges with that. And then when you're trying to make that transition from a very traditional math program to a new program, those gaps and challenges are amplified by people who are resistant to the change. And so from my perspective, this is just taking us back to the future where we needed to be. And so I think from the perspective that you have 48 states behind this, it increases the probability that we're actually going to be successful. And when you ask if it's a good thing, I'm just going to throw my opinion in because I really believe this. I think in 10 years, we're going to look back at this and everything people went through, and those first PARCC assessments when people are pulling out their hair going, oh my gosh, how did my kid go from 85% proficiency to 45% proficiency in 1 year, and dealing with all of the politics. But if we can continue to move with this, I think we're going to look back in 10 years and say, wow, look what our kids are doing. And not just our kids, but kids all over the country, because this is a higher level of functioning. I mean, the lowest level of use of this is at an application level. So it's exciting.
Have we trained, like the colleges of education, the teacher prep programs, have they switched their programming or their instruction so that teachers are coming prepared to do this?
I can't answer that question. I don't know if anyone out there can. I can't answer that question.
We're all in the same boat together.
But if they don't,
they will. Well, what's exciting is that new teacher, when we talked about Common Core and during the cycle and Lynn's presentation and curriculum and instruction, we did a hand raise of how many people had been involved of Common Core, and I would say it was about 50%.
I was surprised.
We were very surprised. So that's encouraging. Now, were those teachers that were actually from other districts or other states and had that knowledge because they were already in institutions and came to ours, or was it because they had done something in college? Because I'm thinking they have to everyone's aware of it. So, you know, they have to be addressing the Common Core standards. They will in the years to come. But we were pleasantly surprised that so many people were aware of the Common Core standards. What's really exciting is, because I know there's questions, but in Miriam's presentation, she really, her person, Dr. Coleman, really talks at maybe some of the things that you're thinking about. Shifts, what it's going to look like in the future, the college readiness stuff. So why don't we go to that, and then we'll see.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm excited to talk to you about the reading, which is close to my heart, English language arts. So, but before I introduce Dr. Coleman, I did want to talk to you, especially because you asked that question about, you know, how did they come to be? So first and foremost, what I wanted to tell you was that the standards, all of the standards, both reading and math that were developed, they had principles for the development. At the very, very top was that they wanted the students to be college, career, and life ready. And what that meant was that the standards that they were going to write needed to be at the level where we wanted all of our children to be able to succeed globally. And so in order to be ready for college, career, and life, they needed to really up the rigor of the standards.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of their key principles. And David Coleman, which you're going to hear in just a few minutes, he said that they wanted to build a staircase that kids could follow, and if they did so, they'd truly be ready for the demands of college and career. So that was one of the key principles. The other thing is, how did they write these standards? So they didn't just simply go to all 50 states and say, okay, what standards do you use? So what they did is they followed states very closely that had high academic standards that had proven results across the country. And what they did is they built upon those and made a new generation of them. The third thing, and most important, besides the first one, which is the college and career ready, is that they made it focused. So that rather than teaching, as our former, what's his name again? Bill Darrow said, not an inch deep, but a mile wide. We have had so many standards. And I'm going to show you in just a few minutes how many standards we had and how many standards we now have. So they really narrowed the focus and really made what's essential for our students to really be able to achieve. It looks like you have a question.
Yeah, of course. So Common Core, is this still just reading and math? Because I feel like to be college and career and life ready, like, what about your social studies and what about your science?
Oh, it's coming. Wait. I have something for you to see, and so that you're going to be very encouraged by that. So those three things, college and career ready, developing a new generation, and focused. So in order to get ourselves ready, Dr. Coleman identified 6 shifts in instructions. Now, Arnie gave you assignments, and you had A partners and B partners, but I'm Cuban, so I'm going to spice things up. So you're going to be partners, but you're going to be chips and salsa. So again, you two will be partners, and Robin and Carl, you will be partners as well. So if you are, so Donna and Carl, you guys will be chips, and Tiffany and Robin, you guys will be salsa.
Now, is that really, chips and salsa really Cuban?
No.
We're doing something like plantains and...
But they don't know what those are, so chips and salsa, everybody can identify with those. All right, so as you watch the shifts, here's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to summarize those shifts. And so if you are chips, you're going to summarize 1, 3, and 5. And if you are salsa, you are going to summarize shifts 2, 4, and 6. And it's so nice when it works out evenly.
And is there some place, can we direct them to, say, the first pink page, would that be or should we look at?
It will be in your PowerPoint notes.
Yeah, it's the next slide. I was just looking for something big.
Something bigger? No, I have nothing.
I'm looking at the Common Core shifts here and ELA and literacy. Are those the ones you want to look at? It looks like it is, Meryl.
Yes.
If you can follow along with possibly this document, it's in your green section.
Yes, yes.
That gives you the
Yes.
shifts in bigger print.
Yes.
I'm only saying that, I think.
Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Dr. Coleman. And he is having a conversation with the Chancellor of New York City, and he is being interviewed by, I believe her name is Robin Gerstin, and I'm just going to go to the point where he's talking about the shifts. Again, you could go on the website. It's about a 15-minute video, but I really just wanted you to focus on the shifts.
And in fact, if you just Google NY, is it Engage NY?
Yes.
Yeah, Engage NY. There's a whole series of videos, and Dr. Boyle's pointing out the website. There's a whole series of videos that goes into an overview both of the reading and math, and then breaks those shifts down, and they have conversation about each one of them. So this is just a taste of that.
I wanted to get
So they're going to be looking at the ELA shifts.
Right, these are going to be
Yes.
the English language arts.
that's close enough.
Yeah, I just have to.
Some 5 state standards to the Common Core.
I think what's most useful in looking at the Common Core in literacy is to focus on 6 primary shifts in instruction. It kind of changes, the fundamental changes at the heartbeat of the core, so that students really are college and career ready by the time we're done with K through 12. And you might first ask, why do we need to shift? And the commissioner has already talked about the kind of graduation rate and the problem of remediation. But you can see even earlier, if you look at 8th grade NAEP scores, the 8th grade National Assessment of Educational Progress, for 40 years, 8th grade reading scores have not improved at all. They've been completely flat during a period in which we've doubled educational spending. So we've made some progress in reading in the earliest grades, but we've really hit a wall in later reading instruction, later comprehension, not just in New York State, but really throughout the country. And so I like to think of the standards as a battering ram to break through that wall. And in order to do that, 6 things need to change. So the first change in instruction in the core standards is in kindergarten through 5th grade, there's an equal balance of informational text and literary text. What I mean by that is overwhelmingly today in kindergarten through 5th grade, students read stories, they read literature. And we have data that only 7% of what students read now in kindergarten through 5th grade is informational text, including text about history or science, information about the world. And what that does, and that's also true of the curricula they read and the exams they take. But research is clear that the general knowledge built in those early years about the world not only allows them to do history and science in later grades, but actually allows students to read more complex text because they gain a vocabulary and knowledge of the world that informs everything they read. And so it's particularly important for students from diverse backgrounds that they gain a shared general knowledge and rich vocabulary, which they can only gain by reading a coherent succession of knowledge, gaining a coherent succession of knowledge by reading informational text in kindergarten through 5th grade. I think, by the way, this is a wonderful opportunity for elementary school teachers, because what happened is we made K-5 literacy instruction mostly literature, and then we expanded the literacy block because reading and math are so important. We effectively got rid of science and history. We kind of put them off to the side. The core standards enable elementary school teachers to reclaim their rightful role as teaching students about the world through history and science and the arts, as well as literary text. Shift number 2 continues that same theme, but in grades 6 through 12. So rather than these being English language arts standards, they're English language arts standards and also standards for literacy in history and social studies, as well as science and technical subjects. That is, the standard your state has adopted require that science and history teachers take a strong role in educating their children to gain knowledge through reading and writing. Students' ability to read complex primary and secondary sources in history is essential to their independent work in history and social sciences. And of course, in science, one's ability to draw knowledge from text is essential to the practice of every scientist. Practicing scientists spend at least half their time reading, in addition to the direct experiments they do. So that's a shift in instruction. So rather than putting the burden entirely on the English teachers, we're really sharing the burden of literacy instruction throughout the disciplines. The third shift is the advancement of reading in these core standards is an advancement in the complexity of the text that students are reading. Typically, state standards have focused on the skills students gain as they grow in their grades, but that's an okay measure, really just okay, of their reading growth. The real difference between a college and career-ready reader is the level of text complexity, the level of text difficulty they can master. And what we found in researching the standards is that the level of text difficulty, the level of complexity, is far beneath in our high schools what is required for the first year of college. So it's no mystery why there are these high remediation rates, because the diet of students is not at the level that they then face when they enter college or technical courses or career environments. So for the first time, the standards, the core standards, create a staircase of text complexity. What I mean by that is, if you're ready to read third grade text based on these standards, you're then ready for fourth and fifth grade text. Then you're ready to go to sixth to eighth grade text. Then to high school level text, which for these standards truly prepares you for the rigors of college and career. The fourth shift is a focus on text-based answers. What we found reviewing curricula and reviewing instruction informally was an overwhelming number of questions that students are asked when they're reading text, perhaps surprisingly, don't require that you carefully read the text itself. So perhaps in a desire to engage students, we ask them all sorts of questions, what they feel, what they think about, what text might remind them of or connect to. And it's not that those questions aren't valuable, but when they take up 80% of the time, what gets lost is the careful analysis of the text itself and drawing evidence from the text. And it's really that core activity that these standards focus on. How much knowledge and evidence does a student gain from each text that they read, and can they integrate that rich knowledge together? Once that's done, of course, it's very exciting to connect that close work to their experience, to their other reading, but we need first an immersion in the evidence and facts of the text. The fifth shift is what we're calling here writing to sources. If we were to talk about the most popular forms of writing today in the American high school, and since I am a New Yorker myself, I know that they're equally popular in our state, it would be narrative writing. Narrative writing of both personal opinion, meaning what you think about heroes or garbage disposal or school uniforms, for example. These are the common parlance of narrative opinion writing. Things about what you think about things. But also your own experience. So what you've experienced in various times of life, intense experiences. So narratives about your opinion or your experience are at the core of high school writing today. The only problem is, the more you enter the world of career and college, people, frankly, care a lot less about what you feel or what you think. What they do care about, very much though, is whether you can argue based on evidence. Can you assemble evidence that is verifiable and make a claim and support it? Can you convey complex information clearly? So what happens in these core standards is, while narrative is carefully cultivated, more so in the earliest grades, when it's an essential way to develop students' voice and expressiveness and creativity, and also, by the way, an essential way that they gain command of sequence that's essential for argument and informational writing. But in high school, the dominant forms of writing more clearly become writing to argue and writing to inform, in order so that students are ready. And what's also exciting, for the first time, we begin building those capacities from the earliest grades. So beginning in kindergarten, you may know that young children love to argue, and we cultivate their ability to write about that from the youngest ages. The final shift is academic vocabulary is at the core of these standards, and you might even say the true language of power that these standards celebrates. That is, if you look at traditional English language arts standards or a traditional textbook, the first few pages of it are the overwhelming list of literary terminology that they focused on, such as metonymy, et cetera, raising plot, rising plot, falling plot, et cetera. We all know those terms. And they have a role in the hands of a gifted teacher. But the crucial vocabulary that students really need to master is the academic vocabulary that is prevalent not just in complex literary texts, but all complex texts, science texts, history texts. What I mean here is not as much domain-specific vocabulary, like amoeba or cell wall, which is often helpfully bolded on the right side of the page when you're reading, but academic vocabulary like subsequent or hypothesis or theory or evidence. And if you don't grasp those words, all of complex text is not available to you. And this is particularly important for our ELL students, because intensive focus on this academic vocabulary allows those students into a full range of texts that would otherwise not be open to them. So those 6 shifts, you might sum them up as reading like a detective and writing like an investigative report. Akala?
Okay, why don't you take a couple of minutes, and Salsa, you're going to go first, and go ahead and go up and back as you're going to summarize the information.
Could you reiterate what
The
the
six
group
shifts?
tasks are?
The tasks are that if you are shifts, you're going to summarize shift 1, 3, and 5. And you are salsa and you're going to begin. You're going to do 2, 4, and 6. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. What I'm going to do is I want to introduce you to what they actually look like. So this is just a sample, they're not all. So the very first, the top page are the anchor standards, and I want you to think about those anchor standards in terms of what you heard, absolutely, what you heard the first speaker and David Coleman talk about. So I'd like to direct your attention to where it says note on the range and content of student reading. And it's just the second line. It says students must read widely and deeply from among a broad range of high quality, increasingly challenging literary and informational texts. So right there, it's the preamble for these shifts, that we are going to use text complexity, that we need to have a balance of informational and literary text. And then towards the bottom, it says, by reading texts in history, social studies, science, and other disciplines, students build a foundation of knowledge in these fields that will also give them the background to be better readers in all content areas. And that speaks to that rich vocabulary, that academic vocabulary that we need to make sure that we instill so that our students are able to really read at a deeper level. What I'd like to do now is, remember we talked about that we don't want to go an inch deep, but really we want to look at a mile wide. And that David Coleman talked about that staircase, building the staircase so that if truly we want our students to be ready for college and career, how each grade level, starting from kindergarten, how are they going to contribute to that ultimate goal. So we're just going to look, by the way, this top page is the anchor standards. So this is at the end of 12 years, what do we want our students to be able to do? the reason I gave this to you paperclip is I'm going to want you to take it apart. So I'd like you to undo the paperclip, and we're just going to take a look at one standard. We're going to look at standard number 3 under key ideas and details, which is analyze how and why individuals, events, and ideas develop and interact over the course of text. What I'd like you to do is put that sort of in front of you, and then take the very next 2 pages and kind of put them side by side so that you can see how that analyze how and why individuals, events, and ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. You can see what it looks like at kinder. Well, I did not give you all the way to 12th. I just only gave you K-5, just so that you can see an example of it. And what I'd like you to do is just kind of take a moment to look at the staircase of our complexity and see if you have any questions regarding that. Each one of these grade levels is going to contribute to the ultimate goal of having all of our children be college and career ready. We're no longer waiting until they reach 3rd grade. We're no longer waiting until they reach 6th grade. Every single grade level is a contributor to that ultimate goal, which is very, very exciting. What I'd like you to do now is I want you to go to the next 2 pages, and I want you to stand those side by side. And I also want you to look at that number 3, which the ultimate goal again is analyze how and why individuals, events, and ideas. Now what you will notice about this is that this is informational text. So the first 2 pages were literary text. These 2 pages are informational text. What do you notice? Notice
about relationships.
Okay, and it doesn't matter whether it is literary or informational text, correct? We're doing exactly what David Coleman said, that we have to read both, and we have to make connections in both literary as well as informational text. So what's really exciting is that they really focus on what's most important rather than it being a long list of laundry of standards kids have to master. Where did I get this?
Is this in the...
It's in our Common Core.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So before I wrap up my part of this portion of the presentation, we'll be back again like bad pennies and hand it over to Sylvia. I think of what we're about to do, and the quote that he said is, read like a detective and write like a court reporter. And to me, for this year, I think the motto will be, show me the evidence. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia, who's going to talk to you about what will be the evidence, how will we know they have it.
Thank you, Mr. President, governing board members, and cabinet. Actually, I'm going to get to that the partner and describe the assessments in just a bit, but I wanted to tell you the progress we've been making here in Creighton so far. So we've been doing ways to talk about our implementation plan here. That's what I'm going to be talking about. So our implementation plan in math, I think it's in the PowerPoint, and also you may have a handout. It looks like this. Let's see.
Keep going, keep going.
Keep going. Oh, I see. It's after your pink pages, after the darker pink pages. I found it. Did everybody find it? After the pink draft pages, keep going. They're in the wrong order. I apologize. Because it's color coded with green and yellow, like on your screen.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so actually the first page is ELA, but I'm going to start with the math. That's what I have on my screen. So with math, the first column shows you what we did last year, what we implemented last year. We implemented to the full degree all of the Common Core standards in kindergarten, first, and second grade. In third through eighth grade, we called it transitional. And that means that the teachers didn't implement them yet, but we gave them the exploratory time where they were working on those units, on those Wednesdays. The teachers were really getting exposure to the standards in preparation for implementation. The second column, or sorry, I guess that's the third one, the 2012-13 school year, that's this school year, we're implementing all the way through full implementation to third grade. And then starting from 4th through 8th grade, instead of being transitional, now they're moving to targeted. They will be implementing portions of the standard, Common Core standards in the 4th quarter after Ames. They've written the units, they worked on them last year, and they worked on them over the summer, and now they're going to be implementing parts of those units at the end of the school year. The following school year, we'll be moving to full implementation K-8. And then the last column, the 14-15 school year, will be the year of the first PARCC assessment. If you'll go back now to the ELA, previous page, you'll see that in the ELA we implemented to full implementation in kinder and first grade, while 2nd through 8th grade were just transitional last year. And this year, we're moving to full implementation adding 2nd and 3rd grade, while the others 4th through 8th grade are again going to be targeted and are implementing after Ames.
We're still doing 4 hours a day for English language learners, and basically, correct me if I'm wrong, most of it when they started it, we weren't allowed to put anything that had value, like teaching them social studies while teaching them English, or teaching them history while we're teaching them English, which made no sense because they had nothing to compare it to. So we still have the English language learner 4 hours a day. How is this going to impact them, or are they still segregated over to the side with nothing that makes sense?
While they are
to get any type of bridge to life skills, or
right.
So they're like I say, segregated,
integrated,
and then they become integrated, and we expect them to do this in 3rd grade when they've had no practice, and their peers that they're with end up, they've been doing it since kindergarten, and all of a sudden we're asking to do this without any experience, and the ones they're with, the peers, have had 2 or 3 years of doing it. Is this the same system we're using?
From what I understand, the direction that the OLS office is giving has changed. They went from saying you couldn't bring in social studies and science to now seeing that Common Core is requiring it, that they've kind of loosened up on that and really see the need for the integration and bringing in the other content areas into the ELD classroom.
So we can bring content into
From what I understand,
English
looking at
learners.
That is correct.
So
But the
then,
focus is still developing the language.
Yes, the focus is still that.
yeah, of course.
But what they're talking about and what they're doing is working with real information instead of random topics.
Right.
They're actually connecting it to something real.
So you're talking about doing this up to 3rd grade. I'm looking at English language arts full down to 3rd grade. And it would be across the board for any child who would be at a 3rd grade level, even if they're in English language learner classes.
Correct.
Those 4 hours.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Let me tell you a little bit more about the work that has been accomplished. In the 2011-12 school year, as described earlier, we had those Wednesdays. They were about once a month where the teachers got together, and they were by grade levels and they were by subject. And so what we did was we split by early start and late start, and had certain schools working on math, and the early start was working on math, and the late start was working on the reading units. And now that we have the same start time, we're going to have opportunity to give everybody, get all of 3rd grade together, not separated by subject, but we'll give all 3rd grade teachers reading and math Common Core opportunities for professional development. And during that time, they were really exploring the standards. That's what we were doing from the beginning, was just giving them a chance to understand them, even though there were still a lot of misconceptions out there, but we're really trying to focus, get some clarity on those. And also really they started the unit development, breaking up those standards and bringing it down to a meaningful level for teachers. So that's what they were doing with those units. And we continued that work throughout the summer. And in the summer we brought a smaller group together where there was an application process. It wasn't every single third grade teacher. In fact, we only had 6. We had 3 for reading and 3 for math. But they were the ones who applied, who wanted to be there, and the ones who were actually knew the content well. And we wanted the teachers who had high efficacy to be there. And it turned out to be a great time of developing the units, refining units in K2, and building tests. That's something we didn't do before during the school year. During the summer, we built CFAs, and I put in parentheses, there was some extended response items. That's new because our CFAs in the past were all multiple choice. So that was something new we developed over the summer. So this is where we stand now as far as our curriculum implementation. Are there any questions about that? All right, then I'll move on to the assessment portion. I'll continue.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I mean, I feel like developing new curriculum, like these things cost money, and to have like this new and expansive library of texts, informational and literary. Do we have these resources? And if not, where are we getting them? How are we going to deliver the students that curriculum?
I'll try to address it if you want to add on. I think that literary text we've had plenty of, and we know that we can use what we have. And as far as our social studies and science texts are concerned, those are kind of dusty. And they were great sources of actual informational texts that we weren't using. So we're going to ask that the teachers start with what we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. And because I'm Korean, I'm not going with chips and salsa. I can talk about, we're talking about food. I mean, our favorite foods are kalbi, which is a barbecue rib. Bulgogi is another one. Those are both very similar in actual recipe. And then, and kimchi, right? Everybody knows kimchi. So we can have a kimchi partner and a kalbi partner. Okay? No, we could do that, but just like A and B, like you stick together and look at these 2 quotes that are going to be on your screen. And if you would read, or that would be the kimchi person, if you would read, and the A person, if you would respond to these 2 quotes. Yes, please. They're very short. What I think I can overhear you saying is there's quite an evolution of what we're going to be accepting as evidence and how we're going to know that our students are achieving because of the changing standards. Is that clear? So here's what we're going to do. I'd like to give you a little quiz to find out if you are smarter than a 4th grader.
Can I get the room, because I already know I'm not.
Oh, hush. I'm going to be, actually,
Yes.
what I'd like you to do is, I'll read the question and I'll give you a chance to try to solve it. Okay, it's a 4th grade NAEP item. Okay, a dartboard has 3 separate areas. Darts that land in the inner circle earn 100 points each. Darts that land in the middle ring earn 10 points each. And darts that land in the outer ring earn 1 point each. Okay, there's one question there on the front, what was Jill's score? And on the back, there are 3 additional questions. Can Jill win the game? Can Kevin win the game? And can Ruth win the game? I'll give you a few minutes to try and solve it, and you can use a partner if you need to. If you are already finished on the back, make sure that you answer the 3 questions and explain how you know which players can win and which players cannot. Please write in complete sentences. That isn't part of the rubric.
Changing the rules as we go. Isn't the assessment going to be given on a computer?
That's the eventual. Can I give you 1 more minute? If you think you're done, you can go ahead and grab the white packet I put on the counter in front of you. It says math at the top. You can check your answer. So I hope it's clear that from this assessment that it's not just a multiple choice test anymore. That first part was a short answer. It required some simple computation. And the correct answer was 315. The second part are the ovals. Can Jill win the game? It is yes. Can Kevin win the game? Yes. Can Ruth win the game? No. But the explanations also matter. So these are some acceptable explanations as are listed. Jill's score is 315. Kevin's final score is between 124 and 324. Ruth's final score between 106 and 306. Jill can win if Kevin and Ruth both have scores less than 315. Kevin can win if his score is greater than 315, and Ruth cannot win because her highest possible score is 306, which is less than Jill's scores. So these are all parts of explanations that are acceptable. Okay? And even within an explanation which is acceptable, there's two things to note. One's complete explanation, and that's going to be considered an extended score. And if it's an acceptable, yet maybe incomplete, there are some that are going to be incomplete that you'll see further along, but they are still considered satisfactory. Okay? So following below, extended and satisfactory are kind of like the meets and exceeds kind of rubric. And if you turn the page on the back, you'll see that there's partial, minimal, and incorrect. So these are the scoring, this is the scoring rubric. And then there are some student samples where you'll see what was acceptable for each of those categories. So if you'll turn to the last page, be mindful of time, what I'd like you to look at is the very last page of the white packet on the back. So this item was on the 2011 NAEP test for 4th grade. And in our country, the kids who took this test, I highlighted that 6% got the extended and 7% were satisfactory, meaning that only 13% were passing across the country. Yes.
We have no way to determine how Creighton did.
Creighton didn't even take it in 4th grade.
We didn't even
We didn't take. We weren't assigned to take this test in 4th grade. I think one school did. They randomly select certain schools. I think Loma Linda may have been a part of this one, but last year, for example, Monte Vista, we gave it to our 4th graders in writing, not in math. They just tell you they just assign you a section to take.
It's randomly selected each year. We get our letters say, these are the schools, and these are the grades, and these are the content.
Correct. So this is just a little an indicator of where we're going. This is a math example.
Could I just add something? I mean,
sure.
So this is what we think might be a sample of a test, one test item for a student on the test. And you can see the passing rate of the kids nationwide. That's why what we're seeing some of the predictions in terms of how students will do on these first round of assessments are pretty dire. But you can also see that it's asking children to take what they know and the skills they know and put it at an application level and to solve some problems. So it's a little bit different than what they're used to getting.
Yeah. And what I would say, when we had an opportunity to do the same sample at our leadership retreat, it was really evidential that if students start in the early kindergarten and start learning the concepts, by 4th grade they'll be able to do this. If the teacher models this type of problem solving, students will be able to do it. If students have the opportunity to have guided practice at it, they will know how to do this, but they haven't had this type of instruction.
And the rubric, if you look at what was required, there's 3 sections, are computation, conclusion, and explanation.
Yes.
And we pretty much have been stopping at computation, maybe some conclusion, but the explanation is probably instructionally where we've been lacking, and we are much more aware of it with these assessments. And not to torture you, I did hand out another test, it's green. It's a reading test. And so there's a 4th grade reading passage that the kids would read, and after they finish the reading, the question is, think of the kind of person that Shannon Lucid needed to be in order to become a space pioneer. Choose a real person you know or have read about, or a character you've seen in a movie or television show. Explain how that person or character is like Shannon Lucid. So it's a writing test, really, but you have to be able to read and comprehend what was in here and use the text evidence that Miriam was talking about to justify your decision. And so that's the difference in this assessment as well. It's not just a multiple choice. Do you know who she is? What was her job? You know, true or false? So those types of questions, they have to read it and be able to explain. So that's, and then the package following it is an explanation for you. And if you'd like to know where we got this, and a tool we're going to show to teachers is the NAEP website. It's on your screen right now. It should be there soon. There's a part right here called the questions tool. And if you select on the questions tool, you can select the subject. So I'll show you how I got to the math one. So I'll click on mathematics. And over on the right, oops, excuse me. I'm having a hard time with my screen. I'm going to select just 4th grade. The NAEP is only given in 4th, 8th, and 12th grade. So this has its limitations, this tool, because it's only for 4th, 8th, and 12th grade. But it gives us a good idea of what the other grades might look like. And I'm going to unselect multiple choice and short constructed response and just look at extended constructed response. And then I clicked on the one called hard. Oh, winner, determine a winner is the first one. Propose number using place value, determine a winner. So when I clicked on that, it gave me the problem. And if I select the view detail, that's where I got everything else I handed out to you. I gave you the question, and then there's that scoring guide that came after, and the sample responses. The teachers know what it could look like. And then the National Data tab is where I found the information about how that item actually performed. That it was only like 13% who passed that item. So this is a tool we want to show teachers to get an idea of what the PARCC assessment may potentially look like. Heading back to our PowerPoint for a second, the last part about assessment is just to review that these new assessments, the new piece for us is that the extended response is new, where we really are expecting students to justify and do it in writing. And that's not the only part of PARCC, as Mr. Zaragoza mentioned, the technology part. We know that's new in PARCC. However, we don't have the capability right now. So the first steps in Creighton are to focus on the extended response, the justification, and the writing. That's where we're going to begin to implement parts of this assessment, of the new assessment. Are there any questions about the assessment? And if I could also, just to make it even clearer, if you go back to, Arnie said about the math practices, the eight math practices. You'll see that with that target question, they had to make sense of a problem, they had to reason abstractly and quantitatively, they had to construct viable arguments, that's what you were writing about, and attend to your precision. Those are all math practices. You wouldn't get all of these math practices, you wouldn't see them if you didn't have tasks that kids are given that are at that level. And if you look at the reading assessment, the green test you were given, and the ELA shifts that Miriam talked about, those 6 shifts, you had to talk about text-based answers, increased writing from sources, and using academic vocabulary. So those are all just examples of how the assessment and the standards go together. We really need to build our assessments and our instruction to meet the new standards. Thank you.
So, we've looked at a little bit at curriculum and talked about how the Common Core standards are coming into our district. Looked at assessment, what our students are going to be able to do. And then we, as a curriculum and instruction team, along with our cabinet and our leadership, we ask ourselves, are our students really ready for our Common Core standards? Are they really ready for Common Core assessments, like the PARCC? Probably not. So what are we doing as a district, as a leadership team, to get our district ready, to get our students ready, to help our teachers and to support them. And that's when we look at instruction. I'd like to talk, or I'm going to talk a little bit about rigor too, but I'd like to talk about, Miriam and I will talk about one instructional initiative that we are putting into place this year in math that we really hope will take our students from where they are and bridge them, bring them to where they need to be so they can function with our Common Core standards and our Common Core assessments. And then Miriam will talk to you about an initiative that we're doing in reading to do the same. So I want you to look at this quote. And under your tab of Initiative 3, there, I think it's the very first page, I think it's kind of gold. Oh, mine's yellow, okay, it's that one. This article is wonderful. It talks about the myth and the truth of rigor and what a lot of assumptions that we really make. If you look at this quote here, rigor is creating an environment in which each student is expected to learn at high levels. Each student is supported so he or she can learn at high levels, and each student demonstrates learning at high levels. I'd also like you to turn to page 5 in that article and look at myth 7, kind of like in the middle of the article. And the last paragraph, just take one moment to read that. Even your most disconnected, starting there. Article, I'm sorry, paragraph. We really feel that we have a perfect way, a perfect connection with WestEd to help our kids really master this rigorous thinking. And the program is called Math Pathways and Pitfalls. The goal of the program is to turn pitfalls, misconceptions, mistakes into pathways for learning, to develop mathematical language, and to address multiple modalities, develop a community of learners. We're partnering with WestEd to bring this program to every single classroom in our district this coming year, from kindergarten through 8th grade. And I'll tell you a little bit how we're going to do that when I just tell you a little bit more about the program. When you talk about pitfalls, mistakes, misconceptions, they really can produce cognitive dissonance, they can stimulate inquiry, and they can motivate awareness. Our goal, one of the strategies, is to turn those pitfalls into pathways for learning. How are we going to do that? In this program, during a lesson, we'll discuss both the correct and incorrect solutions. We'll ask why a solution makes sense or it doesn't make sense. We'll foster an expectation that we learn from our mistakes and we look for pitfalls. On multiple choice assessments, because that's what we have a lot of, we'll discuss why a particular choice was a pitfall, what makes sense, what can be eliminated, look back and see if the choices that we selected, if they even make sense, and start defending why does that make sense. We also want to really develop an academic language in every single classroom. What do we want students to be able to do? We want them to translate from one representative form to another, where it's from symbols to pictorial to concrete. They have to be able to translate. They have to know the meaning of math terms. They've got to distinguish between academic and informal use of mathematical words. They have to distill core mathematical meaning from verbal math problems, questions, statements, or explanations, even when the sentences are complex or different for everyday English. And they have to communicate using their academic language. When they actually present their defense, they have to use their academic language. How are we going to do that? In the classrooms, this program is embedded in the classroom, is discussing problems, using contrasting examples and solutions, including the correct and the pitfall reasoning. They actually show these kids what a pitfall is, and this student chose this pitfall. Why did that student choose that? So you're really looking at correct responses and incorrect responses. We're providing opportunities for students to enter a discussion by varying the linguistic demands of the questions and their required responses. We're going to be addressing multiple modalities in this program. That, of course, boosts learning. It makes instruction more accessible to diverse learners. We're going to ask students to explain and show their ideas with drawings or materials, to label their drawings, to discuss their mathematical idea, and then they have to summarize in writing they can use their drawing even in younger grades, and then they'll have to actually use words in older grades. The final goal of this program and the strategy that will be shared with all the teachers is to build a community of learners and support risk-taking in the classroom. There's a strong correlation between intellectual risk-taking and higher achievement. For English learners, risks are based both on their content knowledge and their linguistic ability in English. A supportive collaborative environment must be established that supports risk-taking, and this will begin all the way at the kindergarten level, or as low as the kindergarten level. How are we going to do this? We're going to give students time to privately grapple with an idea. Allow time to work with a partner to kind of flesh out their ideas without having to expose ideas to the class until they're more completely formed. So they just get that little talking part. And then slowly invite the students to share their thinking with the entire class. And we have to vary the structures, vary the risk structures. Gradually increasing linguistic and mathematical risk structures increase intellectual risk-taking. So there'll be a starter problem, which will all be private, then a read and a listen to an okay answer, and then listen to a pitfall, and that'll still be private, and then you discuss why the answer was okay and why the pitfall. You do that first individually, you're doing it privately, then you do it with a partner, then you share out with the whole class. And there's discussion starters that teachers will be aware of, discussion posters, so it will be a very explicit, clear strategy of how you get students to discuss this. And what's so exciting is that this goes hand in hand with the math practices. So even at the kindergarten level, we will be able to go in and see evidence of students really looking at their pitfalls and trying to turn them into pathways. And the program is called Math Pathways and Pitfalls. How we're going to do this is we're going to have, in the end of August, a 4-day trainer of trainers with WestEd. We will have equal trainers in our district. Then from there, we will have 6 Wednesdays, the 2-hour Wednesday, and this isn't in there, I'm just telling you, yes, I'm sorry. We'll have, absolutely, absolutely. And you know what, we were just kind of looking at dates and you know, making sure that principals are all okay with this, and it's on our agenda for our Tuesday Ed Service meeting. So as soon as it's kind of in draft form, as soon as it's finalized, you will definitely have a copy of that. But then we'll spend 6 Wednesdays, K-8, really discussing and training the teachers along with this. And this is one thing that Dr. Wagner insisted on. If you're going to do anything in kind of initiative, then you have to have that coaching that goes along with it. So then after the teachers are taught something on a Wednesday, then they'll have time to play with it privately or with their children, and then there'll be reflective coaching all along the way to all teachers. And each teacher in our district will be provided an actual book and with everything in it and everything they're learning. So they'll walk away with strategies, they'll walk away with materials, and it'll be gradual. They'll, like on the first Wednesday that we meet, they'll actually get their book, they'll have a strategy they're using, and then they'll have an activity that they're expected to go back and do with their class, and then coaching will follow that. And so it's not like they're going to be expected on that first 2-hour Wednesday to implement the entire program. It will be a gradual program that really will help bridge this gap between where we are now and where we need to be to participate in Common Core. So that's the math.
If I could just, I know we're running late, but I just want a couple of things back on the rigor. Number one, I gave Philda the wrong article, so your article's not complete, and we'll get you a new complete article. So you can read it, because I know you're all going to run home tonight and read that article.
Oh, the rigor?
So we want to make sure
that
when you see the missing pages, you know why. And then the other thing I want to point out in your packet is during our seminar this year when we were looking at rigor, and we looked at our T4S, our Creighton T4S instrument, and you'll see it in there. And you'll see one of the descriptors is highlighted. That was the only change we made to the CT4S instrument in terms of the rigor. So if you look at that second descriptor under communicate selected standards or objectives, it says aligns learning to DOK that's depth of knowledge level 2 or higher as required by the standards objectives. We don't have time to go into depth of knowledge, but we'll probably come back at another point and share with you what depth of knowledge is and how that works. But it's starting with what you're teaching and making sure that what you're teaching is at a very high level, so that everything you do under that is aligned. So I just wanted to point those two things out.
And then one of the things I was just going to offer is I did bring a series of teacher books with me in my car. If you would want me to, of course I want them back now, but if you'd want me to leave them for your leisure look at, or if anyone's interested in looking at a grade level, the books are broken up into K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 6, 7, and 8, because that 6th grade can always be, you know, should we include it in the 4, 5, and 6, or the middle school? But I do have the 4 books with me, and I'd be more than willing to bring them.
That way, when you get done with the rigor article tonight, you can jump
right into it. So if anyone's interested and would like to see what really is this,
maybe if you left with Dr. Boyle or Hilda, and then we could, we wouldn't be stuck on one grade or something. Or if we had a question later that we could kind of pick them up, that would be great.
Okay, I'd be more than glad to do that. I have more.
And then you come in for individual meetings so that
I'll make sure I bring them to you.
So, quick question on this math.
Yes.
Pathways and...
I know, I said it backwards all the time. But
Yeah.
pathways
Yeah.
and pitfalls.
I mean, wasn't it just last year that we went with balanced math? Like, how is this correlated, and is this totally new? Like, how does that all fit together?
It's absolutely perfect. It fits in, especially with that conceptual understanding. And as we did balanced math, one of the components that we really decided after we were into it, with WestEd's advice and with leadership's advice, is we weren't really going to go into the problem solving because our teachers really weren't ready for it, and neither were our students. So we talked about putting that off till this year. This math, pathways and pitfalls, is perfect married to problem solving. It will be a great precursor to balanced math and also to the Common Core.
Okay.
It just fits in seamlessly.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
it's like green tea.
Okay, and last but not least, we're going to talk about just very, very briefly about the K3 Academy. So I know that it's under your tab initiative number 1, and it's in pink. And yeah, it says draft on it because this draft is about to become reality very, very quickly. This is our opportunity to ensure that we prepare our K3 teachers with the techniques necessary to teach intensely and deeply. They really need those skills. We have so many K3 teachers that are brand new and that they really need all of those techniques, that deep information about how to teach Common Core, This is also an opportunity to have a response to Move On When Reading. And so this is in draft form, and the way that we are going to execute this is exactly as Arnie said, and Dr. Bogner has said many times, that any time that you put something in front of teachers, there needs to be coaching support and there needs to be accountability. So these are some draft, these are the actual topics that we are going to hit, and it will be myself as well as 2 other instructional coaches who are very well versed in literacy. I wanted to just kind of show you, thinking about the shifts and what we talked about. If you look at guided reading 1, which is session number 3, and we talked about narrative versus expository text, it's really talking about that shift of making sure that we are addressing, even at the K level, what does it look like when you're looking at literary text? What does it look like when you're looking at informational text? And teaching teachers how to build upon that knowledge so that kids really are immersed in both. It's going to be a total of 6 sessions, and this is just to start. We are going to have all K teachers together, and then all first, all second, all third, and it will be differentiated.
This is just in response to several things. Number one, we have the Move On When Reading, and we've been working on a lot of things in terms of our Tier 2 and Tier 3 reading. And so we've put that in place. This will be the 2nd full year of implementation. Miriam and Melissa Shook out of Special Ed have been working very hard with our reading interventionists and our special ed teachers who are delivering those services. And as Miriam says, as we've added new teachers, particularly at K3, and understanding how critical we move on when our kids being proficient by 3rd grade, we want to ensure, and we're not always sure when people come out of the university, sometimes even when people have been teaching for a while, we're not always completely sure that they have the skills they need to be successful as reading teachers. And so this is our response to ensure that when you look at our core instruction in reading, that we've put in place the training and the support for our teachers so that they have those skills and they have those tools that they're going to need to be successful. So.
Any questions about the K3 Academy?
The training you said will be differentiated. Is that by grade level or by
level of experience?
Okay, great, thank you.
And also by grade level. So K, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So there will be 4 sessions. Okay.
And then, as Miriam, just stay up here, as a district and especially representing the curriculum and instruction department, we've talked a little today about the 3 initiatives: curriculum, assessment, and instruction. And if you look at the last slide, which is, I know your theme, we're doing what we can to support our teachers and our district to excel to the next level as we continue to move toward rigor and enrichment. So, thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to present.
Oh, sure. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us.
All right, lunch.
Yes, in the large conference room next door.